Captain Laura Bennett stood at the main window of the exploration vessel Horizon. The stars looked different here, beyond the edge of known space. No human had ever been this far from Earth before. The ship hummed quietly around her. It was the middle of night shift, but Laura couldn't sleep. Tomorrow they would activate the new faster-than-light drive for the first time. "Captain, you should rest," said Eric Mason as he approached with a mug of coffee. The communications specialist had dark circles under his eyes, too. "I could say the same to you," Laura replied with a small smile, accepting the drink. "Too excited," Eric admitted. "First humans to break the light barrier. That's something, isn't it?" Laura nodded. The Horizon was small compared to military vessels, but it was perfect for their mission. Explore, make contact if possible, and return safely. Just 5 crew members, all experts, all friends after the 3 years of training together. "Do you really think we'll find anyone out there?" Eric asked. "The universe is too big for us to be alone," Laura said. "But finding them on our first trip would be quite lucky." Morning came quickly. The crew gathered on the bridge. Eric at communications, Diane Porter at the science station, Greg Nichols handling tactical systems, and Samantha Wright at engineering. "FTL drive is ready," Samantha reported. Her hands moved quickly over the controls. "All systems check out perfectly." Laura took her seat in the captain's chair. "Let's make history, everyone. Samantha, engage the drive." The stars outside stretched into lines, then vanished as the ship entered FTL space. The crew cheered. They had done it. Broken the light barrier. Humanity had truly become a spacefaring species. For 3 weeks they explored. They mapped new star systems and planets. They collected data that would keep Earth scientists busy for decades. But they found no signs of intelligent life until the proximity alarm sounded. "Unknown vessel approaching," Greg said, his voice tense. "It's huge, Captain. At least 20 times our size." "First contact protocols," Laura ordered immediately. "Eric, prepare all greeting messages. Diane, analysis. Greg, defensive posture. Only weapons powered down." The alien ship was beautiful. It gleamed with a metal that shifted colors like oil on water. It moved with impossible grace for something so large. "They're scanning us," Diane said. "Very thorough scans. They're inside our computer system somehow." "Let them look," Laura decided. "We have nothing to hide." "Captain," Eric called out. "They're sending a message. I think they're inviting us aboard." Laura felt her heart race. This was it. What they had dreamed of but never truly expected. "First contact. Prepare the shuttle," she ordered. "I'll go with Eric and Diane. Greg, Samantha, watch over the Horizon." The alien ship opened like a flower to receive their small shuttle. Inside, gravity felt slightly stronger than Earth normal. The air smelled of something like cinnamon. And waiting for them were the Viridians. They stood taller than humans, with skin that shimmered like their ship. They had 4 arms and moved, with fluid grace. Their eyes were large and completely black. "We welcome you, travelers," one of them said in perfect English. "I am High Commander Zex of the Viridian Hegemony." "You speak our language," Laura said, amazed. "We extracted it from your computers," Zex replied. "A simple matter. You are humans, yes? From the planet Earth." The meeting lasted hours. The Viridians explained that they were part of a large alliance that controlled this sector of space. They seemed especially interested in human emotions. "This concept of compassion, explain it again," another Viridian named Leth requested. Diane tried her best. "It's when you feel concern for the suffering of others and want to help them, even if there's no direct benefit to yourself." The Viridians looked at each other. "And this is common among humans?" "Very common," Eric said. "It's part of what makes us human." The aliens seemed confused by this. Laura noticed they exchanged glances often, as if silently communicating. "We would like to learn more about humans," Zex finally said. "Perhaps an exchange of knowledge and culture," Laura agreed happily. This was even better than they had hoped for. peaceful contact, cultural exchange. They arranged for further meetings and returned to the horizon full of excitement. But Diane seemed troubled. "What's wrong?" Laura asked when they were alone. "Something feels off," Diane admitted. The way they talked about compassion like it was completely foreign to them. "They're aliens," Laura reminded her. "Their psychology is different." "I know, but did you notice there were other ships in their docking bay? Different designs, and I saw other species too in the background. None of them spoke or interacted with us." Laura frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't know yet," Diane said. "I just think we should be careful." Over the next few weeks, relations with the Viridians deepened. They shared star charts and histories. The aliens were thousands of years more advanced than humans. They had controlled this region of space for millennia. The Horizon crew was invited to attend various ceremonies and meetings. They learned that the Viridian society was strictly hierarchical, with clear dominant structures. The concept of equality seemed as foreign to them as compassion. One day Laura noticed something disturbing. In a less traveled corridor of the Viridian ship, she saw another alien species, small, gray-skinned beings, being ordered around harshly by Viridians. They moved like frightened animals, flinching at every command. When she asked Zex about this, he seemed surprised by her concern. "The Tellurians, they are a servant species. They have always been so." "You mean they're slaves?" Laura asked, horrified. "That word has no meaning to us," Zex replied smoothly. "Every species has its place in the order. Ours is to rule. Theirs is to serve." Laura reported this to her crew. Greg wanted to leave immediately. Samantha suggested they could help some of the servant species escape. Eric urged caution and more information gathering. "We need to be diplomatic," Laura decided. "We're representing all of humanity. If this alliance is as powerful as it seems, we can't risk making enemies. But we can't ignore what we've seen either." She didn't know it yet, but the Viridians were already making plans of their own. They had been watching the humans closely, studying their compassion, their concern for others. To the Viridians, these were not virtues, but weaknesses to exploit, and 3 months into their peaceful exchanges, the trap would spring shut. 3 months had passed since first contact. The crew of the Horizon had been invited to attend a special ceremony on the main Viridian ship. Commander Zex called it the joining of paths, supposedly a ritual to mark the alliance between their species. Laura felt uneasy as she and her crew boarded the shuttle. Greg had insisted they bring hidden emergency beacons just in case. "You worry too much," Eric told him. "Maybe," Greg replied, "but better safe than sorry." The grand hall of the Viridian ship was decorated with symbols they didn't understand. Hundreds of Viridians stood in perfect rows. The silence was strange. No chatter, no movement out of place. "Welcome, friends," Zex said from a raised platform. "Today we honor your species by bringing you into the proper order of things." Laura noticed movement at the edges of the room. More Viridians were entering, these ones wearing what looked like armor. "Proper order?" she asked carefully. "Yes," Zex replied. His forearms opened wide. "Every species must find its place. Yours is now clear to us." It happened so fast. The doors sealed shut. Armed Viridians surrounded them. Zex's friendly manner vanished completely. "Your kind possesses useful traits, but your weakness makes your proper place obvious. You will serve the hegemony now." Greg reached for his concealed weapon, but Laura stopped him. They were completely outnumbered. "What do you want from us?" she demanded. "Study. Understanding. Your compassion is unusual. We need to know if it can be removed, or if your species must be modified to be truly useful." They were separated by force. Laura saw Diane struggling as she was dragged away. Samantha knocked down 2 Viridians before being stunned by some kind of energy weapon. Eric called out Laura's name as he was pulled through a different door. Laura and Samantha were taken to the Viridian flagship. Greg was sent to a military research center. Diane went to a biological research facility. Eric was taken to a place where they studied communication and psychology. None knew where the others had been taken. Laura's new room was a cell with a clear front wall so she could be observed at all times. The space was clean but bare, just a sleeping platform and basic facilities. Through the clear wall, she could see other cells. Some held creatures she had never seen before. Days passed in a blur of tests and questions. The Viridians were particularly interested in her reactions to various scenarios they created with holograms. They showed her images of her crew being hurt. They wanted to see how she would respond to the suffering of others. "Why do you care what happens to them?" a Viridian scientist named Krell asked after one such test. "It provides you no advantage." "Because they're my friends," Laura answered. "My crew. My responsibility." "But if you abandoned them, your own chance of survival would increase," Krell insisted. Laura shook her head. "That's not how humans work." Meanwhile, Samantha was being forced to work on Viridian engines. They wanted to understand human engineering approaches. She noticed that the other alien workers, clearly slaves, stayed away from her, afraid. One day, a small gray Tellurian dropped a tool near her. Samantha picked it up and handed it back with a gentle smile. The creature looked shocked. Later, it returned and secretly slipped her a small object, a data device of some kind. When she was alone, Samantha examined it. It projected a simple map of the ship section she was in. There were markings she didn't understand, but she recognized one symbol that matched a marking on her cell door. Greg was enduring different tests. The Viridians wanted to understand human tactical thinking. They forced him to play war games against their commanders. When he won, they punished him. When he lost, they gave him extra food. They were trying to condition him to fail. But Greg was smarter than they realized. He deliberately lost simple games while memorizing everything he could about Viridian military protocols. He watched how they treated other prisoners. He noted which guards were cruel and which ones seemed uncertain about their orders. Diane's situation was the most invasive. The alien scientists took samples of her blood, skin, and even tried to study her brain patterns. They seemed fascinated by her emotional responses. "Your brain chemistry changes when you see others in pain," one scientist noted. "Even when they are not of your species." "Explain." "It's empathy," Diane said. "We imagine ourselves in their place." The scientist looked disgusted. A dangerous evolutionary mistake. Eric was isolated from other prisoners. The Viridians were using him to study human language and thought patterns. But Eric turned the tables. He began learning their language instead. He listened carefully to the guards talking, memorizing words and phrases. He also discovered something important. The Viridians communicated partly through color changes in their skin, subtle signals humans couldn't easily detect. But Eric began to recognize patterns. 2 months into their captivity, Laura managed her first small victory. A Tellurian cleaning. Her cell dropped a food tray. Expecting punishment, the small alien cowered. Instead, Laura helped clean up the mess. The next day, the same Tellurian returned. When no one was watching, it made a gesture, pointing to its ear, then to the wall ventilation system. Laura listened at the vent that night and heard faint tapping. After several tries, she realized it was a pattern, a simple code. Someone was trying to communicate. She tapped back. Over the next days, Laura established contact with another prisoner through the ventilation system. She learned that there were hundreds of captive species throughout the hegemony's territory. Most had been enslaved for generations. "We need to find the others." Laura tapped into the vent one night. "My crew." The reply came slowly. "Many new humans. Different places." Laura began asking questions during her tests. Casual questions about the ship, about how many humans they had captured. The Viridians, arrogant in their power, sometimes answered. Bit by bit, she built a mental map. She learned that Samantha was somewhere in the engineering section. She memorized guard rotations by counting seconds between their appearances. Unknown to her, the other crew members were also making progress. Samantha had begun secretly helping the Tellurians with their work, showing them easier ways to complete tasks. In return, they gave her information. Greg had identified weaknesses in the Viridian command structure. Their strict hierarchy meant lower ranks never questioned orders, but it also meant they couldn't adapt quickly to unexpected situations. Diane had gained the respect of one Viridian scientist by helping when an experiment went wrong. She had saved the scientist from injury, confusing her captors completely with this act of assistance toward someone who had hurt her. Eric had learned enough of the Viridian language to understand conversations around him. He discovered that the hegemony was not as unified as it appeared. Some younger Viridians questioned the treatment of other species. 6 months after their capture, Laura received a new message through the ventilation system. Others connected. Network growing. Humans changing things. Her plan was beginning to work. The Viridians had made a critical mistake. They had separated the humans thinking it would weaken them. Instead, it had spread their influence throughout the hegemony's system. What the aliens couldn't understand was that human kindness was not a weakness. It was a strategy, one that was about to demonstrate its power. 6 months into captivity, Laura's network spread through the ventilation systems and whispered exchanges during work duties. What had started as simple tapping messages now connected prisoners across several levels of the flagship. The Tellurians proved especially helpful, their small size allowing them access to maintenance areas the Viridians rarely checked. Laura kept track of everything on a mental map. 23 different alien species were in contact now. Most had never communicated with each other before, having been taught by the Viridians to fear and compete with other captive races. Human Strange, a spider-like creature named Varks, had tapped to her. Help others for no gain. We gain friendship, Laura tapped back. Together we are stronger than alone. This concept spread quickly through the network. Species that had been enemies under Viridian rule began sharing small resources, extra food, medicine, information. The Viridians noticed nothing, blind to the possibility of cooperation they themselves had never practiced. Samantha's situation in engineering changed dramatically one ordinary work cycle. A Viridian ship suffered a critical engine malfunction. While docking, warning alarms blared. Guards rushed engineers toward the damaged section. We'll destroy half the dock if containment fails, Samantha overheard a Viridian say. Evacuate non-essential personnel. As they hurried past her cell, Samantha called out, I can help. I know how to stabilize that type of reaction. The guards ignored her. But 10 minutes later, as the situation worsened, the chief engineer himself came to her cell. You claim you can fix this? He demanded. Yes. Your containment field is similar to our experimental models. I need access to the control systems. The engineer hesitated only briefly before opening her cell. If you try to escape or sabotage, anything you die instantly. Samantha nodded calmly. I understand. They brought her to the damaged ship where chaos reigned. Viridian engineers worked frantically, but the reactor's energy levels kept rising. Samantha immediately saw the problem. Your field modulators are out of sync, she told the chief engineer. Let me access the main control panel. Under heavy guard, she worked quickly, fingers flying over the alien controls she had studied for months. The Viridians watched with suspicion as she reconfigured their systems. There, she said after 20 tense minutes. The containment field should hold now. You'll need to replace the damaged sections, but it won't explode. The readings confirmed she was right. The crisis passed. The Viridians stared at her with their large black eyes. You helped us, the chief engineer said, clearly confused. Why? You could have let it explode. Many Viridians would have died. Samantha shrugged. That's not who we are. News of what happened spread quickly among the Viridians. Their leaders tried to explain it as a survival strategy. The human had only helped to avoid being killed in the explosion. But many engineers who witnessed her actions weren't convinced. For Samantha, the incident brought unexpected change. She was moved to better quarters and given limited access to engineering systems under supervision. The Tellurians working in Nene, her section no longer avoided her. Instead, they watched her with something like hope in their eyes. Meanwhile, Diane made a breakthrough of her own. The Viridian scientist she had saved, a female named Thela, began asking her questions when they were alone. Your species helps even enemies, Thela said one day. This contradicts evolutionary logic. Not really, Diane replied. Humans evolved as social creatures. Cooperation helped us survive. But you helped me after I hurt you, Thala insisted, because you're a person, not just an enemy. These conversations continued for weeks. Diane learned that younger Viridians, like Thala, had never questioned their society's structure before encountering humans. The rigid hierarchy was all they knew. The strong commanded, the weak obeyed. The idea that cooperation could be more effective than domination was revolutionary. In the Military Research Center, Greg had earned a dangerous reputation. Despite the Viridians' efforts to condition him to lose their war games, he occasionally allowed his true tactical skill to show. This confused his captors, who couldn't understand why he would reveal his abilities when it only earned him punishment. What they didn't realize was that Greg was fighting a different battle. Each time, he demonstrated superior strategy. Some of the lower-ranked Viridian officers took notice. They began to study his methods in secret. The human uses protection of weaker units as an advantage, one young officer whispered to another. It creates loyalty that doesn't exist in our formations. Greg overheard these comments and built upon them, deliberately showcasing strategies that highlighted cooperation rather than dominance. Seeds of doubt were being planted in the military structure itself. Eric's progress with language had made him invaluable to his captors, who now used him to help interpret communications from other human prisoners. This gave him access to more information and limited movement within his facility. He discovered that many slave species had their own languages the Viridians had never bothered to learn, considering them unimportant. Eric began learning these languages too, becoming a secret bridge between isolated groups. Humans teach us new ideas, a frog-like amphion told him in its clicking speech. Before, each species fought alone. Now, we share and help. The network Laura had started was becoming something unprecedented in the hegemony's history, a community based on mutual assistance rather than fear. Small acts of kindness created bonds of trust that grew stronger each day. One morning, Laura was surprised when her cell door opened outside the regular testing schedule. A group of guards took her to a section of the ship she'd never seen before. There, in a large room with strange equipment, stood Commander Zex. "Captain Bennett," he said coldly, "your species continues to confound us." "We're adaptable," Laura replied. "No. You are dangerous." Zex waved a four-fingered hand at viewing screens showing different parts of the ship. "Your kindness spreads like a disease. Slave species that never cooperated are now helping each other. Even some Viridians show signs of contamination." Laura kept her face neutral, but inside she felt a surge of hope. Their strategy was working. "Your crew member Samantha saved 43 Viridian lives," Zex continued. "She had every reason to let them die. This makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense if you understand humans," Laura said. Zex moved closer, looming over her. "Then help me understand. What do you hope to gain? What is your true purpose?" Laura looked directly into his black eyes. "We don't want to rule like you do. We just want to go home. And we want you to stop enslaving other species." Zex made a sound that might have been laughter. "Impossible. The hegemony has stood for thousands of years. Our way is the natural order." "Natural? Orders can change," Laura said quietly. "And I think yours already is." For the first time, she saw uncertainty in the commander's posture. The network she and her crew had built was having an effect the Viridians never anticipated. Their greatest weapon wasn't technology or physical strength. It was kindness, deployed with strategic precision against an enemy that had no defense against it. After her meeting with Commander Zex, Laura was returned to her cell with new restrictions. The Viridians had realized something was happening among the prisoners, but they didn't understand what or how. They doubled the guards and limited movement between sections, but it was too late. The network had already grown too large to contain. Laura called an emergency meeting through the tapping code. Representatives from each species passed messages back and forth. It was time for the next phase of her plan, what she called strategic compassion. "We must help even the Viridians," she tapped out, "especially the lower ranks. Show them another way is possible." Some prisoners resisted this idea, A reptilian Soren named Krell tapped back angrily. They are enemies, they hurt us. Yes, Laura acknowledged. But their society hurts them too. The lower ranks suffer under the higher ones. We can show them a better path. Slowly, the others agreed. The plan spread through the network. Small kindnesses directed even toward their captors. Help when they struggled. Warn them of dangers. Share knowledge freely. In engineering, Samantha implemented the plan immediately. She began teaching the Viridian technicians more efficient methods. When a young engineer made a mistake, instead of reporting him to superiors who would punish him severely, she helped fix the problem quietly. "Why did you cover for me?" the young Viridian asked in confusion. "Because mistakes are how we learn," Samantha explained. "Punishment just teaches, fear not improvement." The concept was completely foreign to Viridian culture, where failure always meant punishment. But the results spoke for themselves. Samantha's section began operating more efficiently than any other. Greg's situation gave him different opportunities. During a war game, a low-ranking officer made a serious tactical error that would normally result in demotion. Instead of exploiting it, Greg pretended not to notice and allowed the officer to correct his mistake. Afterward, the officer approached him. "You saw my error. Why didn't you use it against me?" "Because the goal isn't to win at all costs," Greg said. "Sometimes helping your opponent become better makes everyone stronger in the end." The officer walked away troubled by this idea. It contradicted everything he had been taught about competition and power. Diane's work with the scientist Thela was bearing unexpected fruit. Thela had begun questioning the hegemony's treatment of other species. "Our history teaches that domination is the only path to stability," Thela said during one of their conversations. "But your human societies function without absolute hierarchies?" "We have leadership," Diane explained. "But it works best when it's based on respect and consent, not fear." "This seems inefficient," Thela said. "Maybe in the short term. But in the long term, societies based on cooperation tend to be more creative, adaptable, and resilient." Thela began secretly sharing these discussions with a small group of younger scientists. They met in unused laboratories, asking dangerous questions about the foundations of their society. Eric had become the heart of communication in the network. His facility for languages allowed messages to flow between species that had never before been able to speak to each other. He taught a simplified form of human language that any species could learn quickly. "Human strange," a gas bladder alien called a Pulon told him. "You have no place in hierarchy. How decide who leads?" "We choose leaders based on ability and character," Eric explained. "And leaders serve the people, not the other way around." This concept spread rapidly among the slaves. The idea that leadership could be about service rather than power was revolutionary. As the 8th month of captivity began, something unprecedented happened. A young Viridian guard secretly approached Laura's cell during night cycle. "Human," he whispered. "Is it true what they say? That in your society the highborn do not punish the lowborn for speaking their thoughts?" "Yes," Laura said carefully. "We value everyone's input. Good ideas can come from anywhere." The guard glanced nervously at the corridor. "There are some of us who question. Not many, but growing." This was the breakthrough Laura had been waiting for. Dissent within the Viridians themselves. "What's your name?" she asked. "Nex. I am only 10th rank." "In our society, Nex, rank doesn't determine your worth. What determines your worth is how you treat others." Nex's skin shifted colors slightly, a sign of emotional disturbance in Viridians. "The things you humans do, helping others even when it brings no advantage. We were taught this was weakness, but you're starting to see it differently," Laura finished for him. Nex nodded. "There are others like me. Mostly young ones. We meet secretly. We watch what you humans do." Laura felt a surge of hope. "Nex, I need your help. My crew members are scattered across different facilities. Can you help us communicate more directly?" The young Viridian hesitated, then made a decision. "Yes, it is dangerous, but yes." With Nex and a growing number of sympathetic Viridians joining the network, Communication became faster and more reliable. Laura received regular updates from her crew. They were all implementing strategic compassion in their own ways, and all seeing results. The Viridian leadership noticed the changes but misinterpreted them. They saw the improved efficiency in Samantha's engineering section and the better performance in Greg's tactical unit as signs that their conditioning was working. They didn't realize that beneath the surface a fundamental shift was occurring. Commander Zex called a meeting of high-ranking officials to discuss the human problem. Their influence spreads, he told the assembled leaders. Slave species are behaving differently. Some lower-rank Viridians show concerning signs of contamination. Perhaps we should terminate the humans, suggested one official. They have provided enough data for our studies. Zex's skin darkened with concern. Not yet. There is something we are missing. Some strategy we do not yet understand. I want to know what it is before we eliminate them. But the Viridian High Command had made a critical miscalculation. They believed they were still in control of the situation, still the observers studying an interesting but ultimately inferior species. They didn't realize they were the ones being changed. In her cell, Laura received a message from Nex. High Command meeting today. They discussed terminating humans, not immediate, but soon. Laura knew they were running out of time. She sent new instructions through the network. Prepare for next phase. Create safe spaces in each section, places where hierarchy is abandoned. Show the young Viridians another way to live. All across the massive Viridian flagship and throughout their other facilities, small pockets of resistance formed. Unused, storage rooms became meeting places where slaves and lower-rank Viridians gathered to share ideas. The Tellurians created hidden passages between sections. Food and medicine were distributed based on need rather than rank. These compassion zones, as Laura called them, demonstrated in practice what the humans had been teaching in theory. That cooperation created strength that domination never could. And, as more young Viridians witnessed these spaces, the cracks in the hegemony's foundation grew larger. The question now was whether they would have enough time before the High Command decided the humans were too dangerous to keep alive. 9 months into captivity, the breaking point came suddenly. Commander Zex received reports of unusual behavior among lower-rank Viridians throughout the fleet. Work units were operating differently. Young officers were questioning orders. The traditional punishments no longer seemed effective at maintaining discipline. After reviewing the evidence, the High Command reached its conclusion. The humans were too dangerous to keep alive. They issued the execution order for all human prisoners to be carried out within 1-day cycle. Nex brought the news to Laura immediately. They fear you now, he said, his skin pale with worry. Not your weapons or strength, but your ideas. Laura had been preparing for this moment. How many Viridians stand with us? She asked. Perhaps 1/3 of the lower ranks, Nex replied. Not enough to fight the others. We don't need to fight, Laura said. We just need to stand together. Laura sent the alert through the network. Every species, every ally, every compassion zone activated their emergency plans. But these were not plans for violence. They were something the Viridians would never expect. In the engineering section, Samantha received the alert while working on the ship's power systems. She had earned enough trust to work with minimal supervision. The Viridian engineers in her section had grown to respect her knowledge and teaching. When armed guards arrived with execution orders, the young chief engineer stepped between them and Samantha. This human has improved our systems by 40%, he said. Killing her would damage the fleet. The guards hesitated, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected resistance. If you harm her, the engineer continued, I and my entire team will refuse to maintain the engines. It was unheard of, a Viridian defying higher authority. The guards called for instructions from their superiors. In the military research center, a similar scene unfolded. When guards came for Greg, 6 young Viridian officers blocked their path. This human has taught us strategies that would benefit the hegemony, their leader stated firmly. We will not allow his termination. The head guard's skin flushed dark with anger. You dare defy a direct order? This is treason. Then we are traitors, the young officer replied calmly. But we stand by our decision. Throughout the Viridian facilities, the pattern repeated. Whenever guards came to execute a human, they found not just the prisoner but groups of lower-rank Viridians and slave species standing together in defense. The command structure began to break down. Upper-rank officers gave orders that lower ranks refused to obey. For the first time in the hegemony's long history, the chain of command had been broken. Commander Zex stormed into Laura's cell section with a team of elite guards. He found her waiting calmly, surrounded by a mix of Viridians and other species. "What have you done?" he demanded, his forearms gesturing wildly. "You've infected my people with your weakness." "Not weakness," Laura replied. "Strength. The strength that comes from cooperation instead of fear." Zex drew his weapon. "I will execute you myself." But as he raised the weapon, one of his own elite guards placed a hand on his arm. "Commander, I cannot allow this." Zex stared in shock. "You too? My personal guard?" "I have watched the humans," the guard said. "They have shown us another path, a better one." All across the flagship, similar confrontations were happening. The hegemony's rigid hierarchy was collapsing from within, not through violence or force, but through the simple power of a different idea. That cooperation could be stronger than domination. In the science facility, Diane and Thala had prepared differently. Thala had access to the environmental systems. When the execution orders came, she released a harmless but visible compound into the air circulation. The compound changed color when it contacted anyone who had recently helped another being. Suddenly, everyone could see who had participated in acts of kindness. And the truth was revealed. Far more Viridians had been secretly helping others than anyone had realized. They were not alone in their doubts about the system. The visible evidence broke the final psychological barrier. Viridians who had been afraid to question openly now saw that many others shared their thoughts. The revolution that had been building in secret burst into the open. 3 hours after the execution order was given, a fleet-wide communication went out from the command center. Not from Commander Zex, but from a coalition of Viridians from all ranks together with representatives of the former slave species. "The hierarchy has failed," the message stated. "We choose a new path, cooperation rather than domination. All executions are canceled. All beings have voice." Laura could hardly believe it when Nex brought the news. "They're really stepping down?" she asked. "Not all willingly," Nex admitted. "The highest ranks resist, but they cannot function without the lower ranks obeying them. And we no longer obey." After 9 months of patient work, the strategic compassion plan had succeeded beyond anything Laura had imagined possible. Without a single act of violence, they had transformed an empire. 2 days later, Laura was reunited with her crew. Samantha, Greg, Diane, and Eric had all survived. They embraced with tears and laughter, sharing stories of their separate journeys. "I still can't believe it worked," Greg said. "I can," Diane replied. "We showed them something they'd never seen before. Strength, without cruelty." The former Viridian flagship was now the center of a very different kind of organization. Former slaves worked alongside Viridians as equals. Thala and her scientist colleagues were documenting the societal transformation, calling it the most important study in our history. 1 month later, Laura and her crew prepared to return to Earth in the horizon. They had been offered the choice to stay and help build the new society, but Earth needed to know what had happened. "Are you sure you want to go back?" asked Nex, who had become a leader in the new government. "You could do great things here. Earth needs to understand what we've learned," Laura explained, "that the greatest power in the galaxy isn't technology or weapons. It's kindness." Nex finished for her, his skin glowing with the color Viridians used to show respect. As the horizon prepared for departure, representatives from dozens of species gathered to say goodbye. The ship would not travel alone. A delegation of former hegemony members would accompany them to establish relations with Earth. Laura stood at the main window of the horizon, looking out at the stars. the same view she had enjoyed 9 months ago before everything changed. "Captain?" Eric said, joining her. "The delegation ships are ready. We can leave when you give the word." Laura nodded. "You know, we came looking for new worlds, maybe new friends. I never imagined we'd change an entire civilization." "That's the thing about kindness," Eric said with a smile. "You never know how far it will spread." The Horizon and its escort ships engaged their engines, beginning the journey to Earth. Behind them, the news was already spreading across the galaxy. The story of how a small crew of humans had defeated the mighty Viridian hegemony, not with weapons or violence, but with compassion deployed as a strategy. In the diplomatic halls of 1,000 worlds, a new phrase entered the lexicon: "Beware the kindness of humans. It changes everything it touches." The day the galaxy learned to fear kind humans was not marked by destruction or conquest. It was marked by transformation and hope.